Okay, welcome to this session which is titled Performance Economy. This is part of a series of these classes in relation to cardiovascular and cardiorespiratory monitoring in relation to both endurance performance and clinical skills. So my advice would be, if you haven't perhaps had the chance to watch the session particularly on cardiovascular monitoring and the session on VO2 max, it's probably worth doing those before you move into this section where we understand about what economy is and crucially how we would assess this. So over the course of this session, we've got three primary aims. Firstly, we're going to need to define what we mean by economy and why it is actually considered to be of enormous significance to endurance performance. And not just endurance performance, I mean really the notion of economy is fundamental to our ability to do just, for example, physical activity or daily tasks. So it's not necessarily a performance indicator alone. It's definitely relevant and has relevancy to all walks of life. Then we're going to appreciate the factors which limit this as an endurance parameter, and that's quite important, and that gets into really issues related to the way in which we test this as a parameter, through to the factors which fundamentally determine somebody's economic status. And then the final part is we're going to connect this economy to VO2 max and understand the generation of what is called VVO2 max, or the velocity at VO2 max, and why that has actually started to have a role to play as a performance indicator, whereas economy and VO2 max are perhaps more physiological indicators. So to explain this, we're going to go back to the mid-90s, and this is from Eddie Coyle. And this is quite a useful schematic for us to work from, because what it does is it sets out for us quite nicely the factors which relate to endurance performance. So we're dealing here with performance velocity, so the ability to move from point A to point B as quickly as possible. That ability is a function of the sustained power. So if it's on a bike, what's the watts we can produce? If it's running, power perhaps isn't quite the term for running, but if we're running, it's the power being generated. That power is fundamentally determined, and how high a power output we can dictate is fundamentally determined by how economical we are, how economically we use oxygen or we use energy, and that is in itself linked to the notion of gross mechanical efficiency. Economy then is linked to what is called the lactate threshold. So the transition from predominantly aerobic to anaerobic metabolism. And so when we start to think about this, we start to understand the connectivity, which is to be economical in an endurance event, particularly if you think about something like the marathon. You need to be economical across a large range of running speeds, but particularly the ones which are closest to your sustainable race pace, which in themselves tend to be very, very close to this point of the lactate threshold. So economy starts to play a pivotal role in this. And then you notice that actually in kind of a hierarchical approach, VO2 max doesn't seem to play such a big role. It's important, it certainly is pivotal in endurance physiology, but actually it doesn't seem to be anywhere near as important as economy or even the lactate threshold. So how do we define this? Well, this is from a recent paper by Barnes and Kilding, and they define it like this, and I think this is a really good definition to work from. Economy is the steady state oxygen consumption, that's VO2, at a given running velocity, which is often referred to as running economy, and it reflects the energy demands of running at a constant submaximal speed. So in this definition, they are really, the papers to do with running, so they're referring to this in relation to running. But it could be cycling economy, so the steady state oxygen consumption at a given cycling cadence or a cycling load is often referred to as economy. So it's really a reflection of the oxygen cost of doing work. And if we think about that in the terms of endurance performance, or in terms of maybe perhaps more of a clinical measure, the notion is really simple, that the less oxygen one uses at the same absolute exercise intensity compared to somebody else, the more economical they are.